Welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, where we interview remarkable people and share strategies for mastering money and living a meaningful life. With your host, Grant Sabatier, creator of Millennial Money and author of Financial Freedom, a proven path to all the money you will ever need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Very excited today to have Logan and Matt, two of my good friends and part of the Topia team. We're going to talk about where are the opportunities for side businesses today. We're going to dive into three areas specifically. I'm going to focus on the content side. Logan's going to talk about his Amazon FBA businesses, and Matt's going to talk about Goated, his new app that he's built, as well as, how you can make money with SaaS products. So got a lot to talk about in this episode. I definitely don't want to go first, so I'm going to punt it to you, Logan. Can you tell us a little bit about your Amazon FBA businesses? This is an area that I've learned so much from you over the past year and a half, and dug in myself and evaluated a number of FBA businesses to acquire. I'm still very interested in the children's space. I have a regular breakfast with a friend of mine named Mike, who works for one of the large Amazon aggregator companies. So I feel like I've gotten a master class on FBA, and it's kind of a crazy time, just given kind of the rise of Temu and Shein, and a lot of FBA products are manufactured in China. And now the Chinese are trying to kind of usurp American sellers and go direct to consumers. And there's just a lot of discussion on, is there still potential for FBA? What are the ways in which you can find opportunities? And then what's kind of the future? I've been hearing recently that kind of FBA is done, which I don't believe it is. You're obviously continuing to make money with FBA as well as evaluate new products to launch. So I'll kick it over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about your Amazon FBA journey?
Yeah, definitely. I guess quick high-level overview of, what Amazon FBA entails. So FBA stands for Fulfilled by Amazon, and the general premise is you get a product manufactured. What I do is I do private labeling. So you build your brand around that product. You then ship them in from your manufacturer to one of Amazon's warehouse, and then Amazon handles all of the fulfillment. So it does all the deliveries and all of the returns. So where kind of my journey started is a pain point in my own life where I was living in London at the time. I was a young professional, and what used to aggravate me more than anything else would be heading to a bar on a Friday or a Saturday for a friend's birthday and having to pay something extortionate for a pint of beer. And I think it was the frugalness in me just used to sit there staring at this overly priced beer, knowing that I could have bought it around the corner at a local store for a fraction of the price. And just the kind of entrepreneur in me started thinking about potential ways I could get around that pain point. I did a little bit of trialing just in terms of making my own little vehicles, which I could sneak my own alcohol into these establishments, which didn't go that well. A couple of awkward leakages is all I'll say on that one. But the more I dug into it, the more I started seeing quite a cool opportunity to produce hidden or secret flasks, which were purely designed to be hyper covert so that you could fill them up with whatever you wanted and take them into any bar, event, cruise, you name it, you could take it in there. So I started doing a bit of research, looking around, reaching out to some manufacturers and going down the process of pinpointing what my first product would be. I think this was about 4 years ago now, so kind of super steep learning curve, a lot of kind of back and forth with a couple of manufacturers just ironing out what that first product could be. But fast forward, maybe a year after that initial kind of MVP I sent to the manufacturers, I was looking at I had 3 different secret flask products all launched on Amazon, and started seeing a really kind of steep growth curve. In terms of how I started that growth, I used a pretty simple formula, which was to reach out to a couple of different bloggers which wrote articles mainly around how to sneak alcohol into festivals or into cruises. I paid them a couple of $100 to feature my products on those blogs right at the top of them, and then the CTA and the link would shoot them right over to Amazon. So that was the kind of simple growth framework I followed, and then started making really, really good cash flow, really, really passive cash flow as well. The beauty of Amazon FBA is it's quite front loaded. A lot of time went into kind of thinking about the product, testing the product, manufacturing the product, but once it was there and it kind of had product market fit, then it's very much a case of just keeping an eye on the inventory when the inventory is running low, making sure that enough of the product's being shipped back to Amazon. So if I really kind of dialed it down, I could easily be spending 1 hour a week maximum on that side business and income stream. And at the time, that brand alone was bringing in 6 figures of profit every single year. So very passive and pretty scalable as well.
Yeah. So you've been doing this a couple of years. Do you think it's gotten more difficult? If you were to launch the Secret Flask today, would it be more challenging? Or do you think the playbook of, getting people who write about this to link to you is still viable?
I think it has become more competitive. There's no doubt about that. There are more people aware of Amazon FBA. There are more people doing it. There's been, as you said, a big sway in terms of Chinese manufacturers jumping into Amazon FBA themselves. So there are more people doing it. And I think, back in the golden era, it could be as simple as just launching a product and just watching it start selling. I think now you just need to be really focused on kind of what your edge is and how you're going to outcompete overseas manufacturers from launching products themselves. So I think to your point, marketing is usually where you can definitely find your edge. A lot of these overseas manufacturers who are selling directly on Amazon don't have a skill set in marketing. They just want to launch a really cheap product and compete on price. And then on top of that, I think, something me and Grant have been speaking about a lot is playing the premium high quality card. And what you'll see time and time again is you'll see, 6 different products. You'll click into 4 or 5 of them and you'll see really poorly written titles, descriptions. The images aren't that great and it just gives a slightly kind of inferior, kind of low quality vibe. I think if you can come in with a good product, make sure it's high quality and make sure all the branding around it is high quality, and then you can bolt in to 1 or 2 different marketing channels, then I'm very, very bullish that assuming there is a bit of a gap in the market for that product, that you can outcompete at least the overseas manufacturers out there.
And there are really kind of 2 paths here. There's somewhat imitating an existing product, and then there's kind of creating a new product category. I know you've had businesses kind of focused on both. Can you talk a little bit about, if you do have an idea or you do see a product on Amazon, how do you go about figuring out if there's demand, for it and whether you could build your own product yourself?
Definitely. So in terms of those 2 avenues, I'll kind of bring it to life within my own journey. So the very first product I produced, it's called a boozy bladder, which I conjured up myself. So it's kind of a bladder which you tuck under your trousers and then you can usually pull it out your flies, and that's how you kind of access the alcohol. So that product, I just conjured it up myself. I knew there wasn't anything out there on the Amazon marketplace. I knew that if I launched it, it would be kind of a blue ocean in the sense that I'd be the only one selling it. The benefit of that is because you're the only one selling it, you've got a much kind of higher chance of succeeding. You'll be able to tap into being the only person producing that product and naturally harvest a lot more kind of income and profit. The negatives are that it will take a lot longer, a lot of back and forth with manufacturers. You're going to have to get multiple samples made, shipped over, usually from China to wherever you are. So much more lengthy in terms of timings, and it's going to be more expensive. So for that first product, I had to pay upfront for the manufacturer to make a new mold, which was, I think, at least $1,500 USD at the time. So more expensive, more timely, but more profit to be made. The second option, like you said, Grant, is kind of emulating an existing product out there. So my second product was called the Umbrella Flask, and looks like an umbrella, but you can screw the top off and it's hollow. For that product, I could see that there were 2 people already selling it on Amazon. But again, one of them was a clear Chinese manufacturing brand. I could just tell, again, from the imagery, from the title description. And the other one was a US seller. So I knew that even if I didn't outcompete one of the 2 or both of them, there was room in the market, because the kind of rule of thumb is if there are 10 or less people selling a product, then there's room for you to get in there. So with that product, what I did is saw it. I found a manufacturer on Alibaba who was already making the Umbrella Flask, reached out to that manufacturer. It was very quick and relatively cheap to get my first order of 100 units, which got shipped in. Spun up my Amazon listing. Like I said earlier, made it slightly more kind of premium, high quality, bolted in my marketing channels in play. And pretty quickly, maybe within 4 months, I was out competing the Chinese manufacturing brand. And what I mean by out competing is I dislodged them from their ranking. So they were second and I was third, and then I became second, and I could start seeing that their sales were going down and my sales were going up. Last thing I'll say on all of that is there are quite a lot of powerful tools out there which you can use to facilitate that sort of analysis. Mine is Helium 10, which is one of the front running tools. With Helium 10, you can do a ton of stuff. I mean, you can see exactly how much revenue you're making. You can see the origin of the brand. So I use Helium 10 to have complete certainty that one of the brands was actually based in China. Helium will give the listing of that brand a ranking. So I think the Umbrella was like a 5 out of 10, which again just means poorly optimized compared to the US brand, which was a 9 or a 10 out of 10. And you can do a ton of other stuff with Helium 10 as well.
So when it comes to the manufacturing, I think that's a part that people really wonder about. You can just go on Alibaba and search for the particular product and then find a manufacturer, or do you need connections to manufacturers? And how do you find someone good that can, first manufacture a product that already exists and probably, on the flip side, manufacture a product that doesn't exist? I think a lot of people just can't imagine making that leap, going from idea to actually getting product in hand. How difficult is that? And can you walk us through that a bit?
Yeah, a lot of people worry a lot about finding the manufacturer. It's actually pretty simple and straightforward. Like you said, I mean, Alibaba is just a huge platform which has a huge number of manufacturers on it. So it's as simple as just typing in the product you're looking for. And if that product already exists on Alibaba, it will pretty quickly appear. The one thing you have to be careful with on Alibaba is just doing your due diligence on the manufacturers, because you do hear horror stories around kind of scams, or they send you a high quality sample and then when they send you the 400 units, they're completely different to the sample. But there are some pretty simple kind of methods and processes you can follow which will do that due diligence for you. One of the big ones is making sure that they're verified on Alibaba, which means Alibaba has gone and inspected their factory. It means that they've been on Alibaba for a certain amount of time and they've done a certain volume of sales through Alibaba. And once someone's verified, what that means, if anything goes wrong, Alibaba will give you a full refund. So just to expand on that a little bit, you would pay upfront for the product, but it's held in an escrow style account on Alibaba, and it would only be released to the manufacturer after you get the products and you give the green light and say, hey, these products look great. The final little, I guess, bonus tip to some degree is when you're placing your first order with your manufacturer, I'd always advise not to send it directly to Amazon. Get it sent to your home first so you can actually inspect all of those products. And then you give the green light, give the thumbs up to Alibaba, and then you send it on to Amazon. So that's relatively straightforward. Just make sure you're doing those couple of due diligence steps to make sure that the manufacturer is legitimate. If you are trying to produce a product which does not exist on Alibaba, it can be a little bit more challenging to find a manufacturer. What you tend to do is look for a manufacturer selling something similar to what you want to build, reaching out to them, and then trying to deduce whether they would customize or build something custom for you. So again, just leaning on my own story with my Boozy bladder. I mean, it's plastic. It's a bladder. It kind of sits, like I said, on your body. So I thought, what's similar to that? And I immediately thought of those hiking kind of hydration bladders, which you put in your rucksack and a little tube comes out, which you sit from. So I started looking at manufacturers which sold those, reached out to 4 or 5 of them, just saying, hey, here are my little kind of mock-ups of what I want to create. Is this possible? And like I said, I actually only got 1 out of 5 said, hey, yeah, we can make this for you. Like I said, got some samples made and finally got to a point where it was high quality and I was ready to sign off on it.
How worried about Amazon are you in terms of them being able to just delist your product or delist your store? I know there's a number of horror stories out there about the risks of building any type of business on Amazon. Is that something you're worried about at all?
It's on the back of your mind, naturally, because like you said, you do hear these horror stories. What I've done in my kind of personal journey is just made sure that I'm diversifying away from Amazon. So all my eggs aren't in Amazon's basket. And the way I've done that is by building out my Shopify store, which I think at the moment accounts for like 20% of my sales. So I still am reliant on Amazon and I want to be pushing more of my sales through that Shopify store. But worst case scenario, Amazon delists me and I've still got my Shopify store. You hear horror stories of being delisted, but usually it's not the end game. Usually you're out of action for 3, 6, like maybe 12 months if you're super unlucky, but you should be able to get reinstated back on Amazon. And, again, as long as you're not doing anything dodgy and you're following all the steps and the procedures which Amazon outline, then, it should be a pretty low probability of them just coming out and delisting you.
Yeah. And as we record this, we have a number of people within the Fivepreneur community who are, evaluating launching FBA products, people who are in the design phase, the manufacturing phase, really, strategizing the marketing launch. It seems like there can be quite a bit of friction. We talked about how to find a good idea. We talked about how to evaluate that idea. We talked about how to get the manufacturing. But people always have two other worries, which is, number one, how much money is this going to cost me to get that first manufacturing run? And then number two, how much time, is this going to take, right? It does take some time to go through the process of finding an idea, evaluating it, getting samples, getting a full run, selling it. Can you talk about how much money someone needs to realistically kind of test an FBA idea, or how much money you had to put up? And then how much time does this process take from kind of idea to actually selling a product?
From a capital standpoint, you're probably looking at $3,000 to $5,000. Very dependent on the manufacturer's minimum order quantity, which basically just means what's the minimum amount of a product you can order.
And is that for the sample, or that's for the whole order?
For the whole shebang.
And do you have to pay for the sample?
Yeah, you've got to pay for the sample, which is probably going to be like $30 to $50 for that sample, which includes shipping, which does take up a bit of a portion of that. I mean, the $3,000 to $5,000 is for a product which already exists on Alibaba, so the manufacturer is not making that product from scratch. If they are, you're probably going to be looking at double that in terms of the range. From a timeline standpoint, I mean, as with a lot of things, it's kind of how quickly are you willing to move with it. I mean, what I'll do is focus on the things which are out of your control, which is assuming your manufacturer is overseas. If they're shipping anything from China to the US or China to Europe, then you're probably looking at 10 to 20 days of shipment time for them to make the sample, again, dependent on the manufacturer, but that could be anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. So that's already a month into the process, which has been wiped out from just purely kind of waiting around for samples/products to come. And then if you order a sample and then you follow through with the main order, it's obviously you're kind of double dipping in terms of that transit time. I think like the fastest I've probably seen anyone go from an idea to making their first sale is probably like 3 months. I'd say the average is probably closer to 5 or 6 months.
So with that $3,000 to $5,000, you're just wiring it to China or paying it through Alibaba with kind of no guarantee, no assurances, or is it put in escrow? How does that work?
If you follow the kind of due diligence steps when it comes to making sure your manufacturer is kind of legitimate, then yes, it should all be handled through Alibaba. You pay Alibaba, they hold your money. Only once the products have arrived and you say to Alibaba, yes, I approve of this order, will the money be released. I mean, you do hear kind of stories of, and this has happened to me a couple of times, manufacturers reaching out to you via email, WhatsApp, iMessage saying, hey, do you mind if you just pay through this link? I mean, that's a red flag just in terms of the manufacturer doing that, and it definitely shouldn't be entertained, especially if it's your first order.
So any last thoughts on how someone who's interested in making money with FBA can get comfortable with making that level of financial and time investment?
I think there are a ton of kind of case studies out there of other people doing this. I think kind of familiarizing themselves with that. I think potentially looking for like a friend or a colleague or someone to partner up with, then it's, less capital at risk. I also just think getting into the habit of going on Amazon, assessing different products, reflecting on your own life, different pain points you've had. I think like cultivating that kind of idea generation mindset is really powerful as well. And as you kind of generate ideas and evaluate them yourselves, you'll get better and better at it, and you'll get more and more confident. And then once you do come across that winning idea, you would have had, 4 or 5 ideas you've thought about and done the research on as well. So I think that would be my golden advice.
Over the years, there's been tons of different FBA courses that I've seen, a bunch of scams in this space. It seems like that's settled down a little bit and people aren't as focused on the FBA space, which is obviously a good thing. That means there's more of an opportunity if there is less competition. And I think of any type of side business, because the barrier to entry is relatively low, but not nothing. I mean, you can start a blog for $20 or $50 as opposed to starting an FBA business, where you could spend $50 for a sample. But to really start selling, you're going to have to invest, at least a couple of thousands of dollars. Because there is that slightly higher barrier to entry, To me, I would see that as a way to keep out competition and really give you an opportunity. If it's something that you are interested in, you can come up with a good idea. It sounds like, the Secret Flask certainly has been phenomenally successful for you in your life as a way to ultimately, help you not worry as much about money and get to cash flow fi and free up your time. Can you talk about, has it allowed you to do that? Has it allowed you to travel more, take more risks? What has FBA allowed you to do in your life?
100%. I mean, completely game changing, life changing as well. Just providing that cushion. And what I mean by cushion, I mean, as soon as I knew my Amazon FBA could cover my expenses, and as soon as I had confidence that there was a clear trajectory in terms of it increasing above my expenses, and I was confident that, I could maintain that sort of revenue and that sort of profit margin, then for me, it was just a huge amount of freedom and flexibility to allow me to spend my time on exactly what I want. And what I choose to spend my time on now mainly is building Topia, the Fi app, which I don't pull a salary from at the moment. So completely living off my Amazon FBA income. If I didn't have that Amazon FBA, then I'd probably be knocking on the door of the corporate world or in a very stressful situation. So it really has just opened the doors for me. It's allowed me to focus on more kind of mission-driven entrepreneurial ventures. And even the fact that it's growing, it kind of opens the doors. So, I mean, an interesting point within my kind of Amazon FBA journey is as soon as it started increasing, the profit I was generated increased above the expenses, my personal expenses. I had a couple of decisions, one, do I increase kind of my expenses and my lifestyle? But obviously the Fi community taught me lifestyle inflation as a big no-no, so I didn't want to do that. So for me, it was like, do I want to now invest that surplus money into the stock market, into a Vanguard fund, into an ETF, and just, cruise on that 7% return every year? And for me, I felt like that I'd grown my skill set, my knowledge base, and I had a good knack for Amazon FBA. I knew that for every dollar I put into Amazon FBA, I could double that, if not more. For me, it was very much a case of, okay, I want to try my hand at another Amazon FBA brand. I want to keep going down this kind of rabbit hole and seeing what I can make out of it. So I quickly spun up a couple of different brands. One was called the Scottish Gift Company, where I focused on producing little Scottish gifts, one of which was a soft, cuddly Highland cow, selling those. And then my latest brand was Prismic Knives, which is kitchen knives, which have quite a quirky, colourful handle. So I did think long and hard about it. It was kind of like, I know investing in the stock market and growing an ETF portfolio is ultra passive and you have to do anything, but I kind of like the idea of putting my surplus money into something where I had more controls on, and I was a driving force and I was the kind of master of its own destiny in terms of growing that wealth. I guess to summarize, in the short term, massively impacted my life and opened so many doors for me, which I could never imagine. And then moving on from that, it also gave me additional cash flow, which allowed me to actually expand that side business and carry on evolving it.
Everybody, welcome Matt, the lead developer of the Topia Financial Independence app. Matt, great to chat with you. Today, we're going to dive into one of your latest ventures, which is Goated. Can you tell us about the app, what gave you the idea, and how you're building an app as a side business?
Yeah, so Goated is an app for tracking your journey to 10,000 hours practicing a skill. Sort of started when I read the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell a couple years ago. The 10,000 hour thing, whether or not how rooted in science that is, I don't know, but I find it super inspiring, right? Of like, hey, if I can dedicate myself to 10,000 hours of playing guitar, I could be Jimi Hendrix. If I coded for 10,000 hours, I could be Bill Gates. I've always just found that to be like the single most inspiring thing ever. And so I'm fortunate in that I get to spend all day, every day working on my skills, whether that's day job as the CTO of Topia, coding, helping out the Fipreneur community in the portal, working on Goated, whatever. I'm coding 6 to 8 hours a day. And I thought, I just want an app to track that and see where I'm at. And so I get to play guitar a lot, kind of hold myself accountable with my practice there and things like that. So it was a very organic app that I wanted for me. It did not start as a SaaS business to get myself to Cashflowify. It was something that I was just excited about. I think as a result of that, it took me 3 years to really get serious about doing it. And then when I did, I was like, I'm committing to working on this thing for an hour a day. And once I did that, 6 weeks later, it was live on Android and iOS after 3 years of kicking it around, right? So that's sort of the story of the Goated app in a nutshell. It's like 5 screens, you add the skill, clock in, and check your stats, how much you've been practicing today.
I'm not a developer myself. Has AI helped at all in the acceleration of the production? I know, there's a lot of talk now of, hey, SaaS companies are all going to suffer because you can build a SaaS company in an afternoon just coding with AI, or you can build an app just with AI. Are you leveraging those tools? Is that true? Can you talk about, someone who's currently a developer right now, if they wanted to get their own app launched, is AI helpful? Is it not? Is that, overhyped? How is that impacting what you're doing?
I'll answer that sort of in two ways. How I'm using it is specifically, I'm using ChatGPT 4. I get the premium version or whatever, and GitHub Copilot are the two products I'm using. Copilot is a tool from GitHub, and I know that there's Microsoft Copilot that does something different, but GitHub Copilot is for coders. It integrates into our coding editor, and as I'm typing a line of code in real time, it spits out what it thinks the rest of that line of code is, and then maybe like 5 after it. I was fortunate enough to get on the beta list for that like a year and a half ago. And like, I don't want to sound emotional or sensitive, but it almost moved me to tears the first time I used it. I was like, oh my God, I can code 10 times faster. And there's different opinions. And like the second part of what I'll say is like, is it going to hurt SaaS companies? Maybe, but only because it's going to give everybody else the tools to compete with them on an even playing field, because you no longer need to like know a guy to get your app idea online, right? With ChatGPT, it's super easy to teach yourself to code. And then there's all sorts of tools like DraftBit is one I've played with that is sort of a visual editor that a non-developer could use to get an app out the door with. You're still going to need to interface with code on like kind of a high level. But again, if you're committed to getting an app out the door, and these AI tools that are around nowadays, they're super helpful with the production, yes, but they are most helpful with just learning how to do it. And that's like what being a developer is just like breaking things, getting stuck, and then getting unstuck like all day, every day. And that's where, ChatGPT and those sort of LLM tools are super great. They're my first stop before Google nowadays. And then sort of the more focused models like Copilot for writing code are just like a crazy efficiency boost.
So you still think there's viability in kind of the average person launching a SaaS business? And I'm saying that through the lens of, I was pretty blown away recently. I was a big Calendly user and paying the monthly fee. And I heard about TidyCow, which is from Noah Kagan's company, AppSumo. And it's like for $31, you basically get Calendly for life, just a one-time fee. And it really blew me away. There's amazing features. It's super easy to use, super cheap. I signed up immediately and I've been using it, religiously. And that's something that certainly Calendly is still around and popular, and certain brands get big enough that even if someone just copies what they're doing, they're just so entrenched. Do you see that kind of as an opportunity or a threat to what you're doing?
I mean, definitely an opportunity as like a one-man band. Like I get a couple hours a week on Goated between everything that we're doing at Topia and having a baby and just got married and whatever. It's a huge opportunity, right? Like I think Calendly, I'm assuming here, speaking in the generic sense, companies like Calendly raised money, built up a big dev team. Now they've got this huge burn and they're trying to run Calendly, I don't know, like any other VC funded SaaS. And it's like, okay, I don't know if that's Calendly's story, speaking generics, right? But it's like, people that take that approach are now stuck with a big dev team, a big burn rate, and the landscape is shifting rapidly to the point where like someone like me or a motivated individual could bring a Calendly competitor online very quickly, much cheaper, perhaps better themselves. And maybe they never beat Calendly, so to speak, but one person is now able to offer real competition. Whereas 10 years ago, that just really was only like David versus Goliath type scenarios that we would see rarely. But now it's everybody, even someone that's only been trying to teach themselves to code maybe a couple months, like can bring a somewhat complicated versus 10 years ago SaaS product online super fast.
So I know there's just a hyperfixation now on kind of AI focused SaaS companies, or just, I don't even know if that's what you'd call them, but I think that's what they are. Where, I see them all the time. It's like xdomain.ai. And it's like this company is skyrocketed to, $200,000 in monthly recurring revenue, MRR, and is this $2.5 million business that came out of nothing. And all it is, some AI tool that just does something like, hyper generic, like cuts up, social videos into smaller chunks or does something like that. Is that something you've looked into? Is that something you think about? Is that just, people riding the AI hype? Is that an opportunity for, someone listening to this podcast?
Absolutely. I mean, so first thing I'll say is like most of what you're talking about is people taking ChatGPT, getting an API key and making like either a fine-tuned model or just like a lightweight wrapper which like as a developer could crank out in like 2 hours. And so super low effort to get something that just like wraps ChatGPT online. And so I think like good and bad with that, ChatGPT and really, I mean, like all LLMs are just such a new tool. We haven't had like a straight up new tool in computers in a long time, as drastic as like LLMs are. I just think it's a huge new blue ocean, but I also think there's a lot of low effort startups springing up, kind of doing what you're saying. But I don't know that that's like a bad thing. Like we make fun of like the crypto bros, but like they were there early and they won, right? So it is what it is. But I think more than anything, there's an opportunity for individuals, for small fish to compete in a big way with big money, which there hasn't been before. And AI is really allowing for that.
Recently over the past couple of months, you developed and rolled out, Sarah, our AI side business assistant, to help you find a side business based on your skill set and your interest. And it's been pretty amazing to watch just how good and accurate that has become. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you built that and basically your thought behind that tool?
Sure. Yeah. The how you build it is, and anyone could replicate this. Logan and I kind of sat, and there's, I think, 5 models now, which we went and curated sort of minimum 10 sample conversations of a system prompt of, hey, ChatGPT, here's what we want you to do. A user input, which is as part of the Fivepreneur portal, you fill out a survey about your skills and interests and what business ideas you have, and as well as a couple other things. And then we've sort of given like 10 business idea responses for all of these scenarios times 10 for each model, right? You just upload that sort of almost spreadsheet to ChatGPT platform.openai.com. And like 15 minutes later, you sort of have like your GPT-4, right? But it's the model that you just fine-tuned. And you just have to sort of do an API integration on the back end, which is something any sort of new developer could figure out quite quickly, or someone could hook up with something like Zapier or whatever if you didn't code. And then you're pretty much off to the races. So the majority of the effort in doing that was not like me coding it or our dev team doing anything like that. The majority of the effort was Logan and I sort of figuring out how to make the AI be like really useful. And so I think that's cool that it's no longer like a data science problem. It is for the people building the LLMs, but for people like us that just want to start using AI now, it's like almost crazy easy, right?
Does it learn, or is it learning, or is the model just getting smarter at like a local level, or is the interface just learning? Like what happens over time? Is anything happening over time? Is it actually getting better, or is that just my, experience?
Yeah, so the model doesn't get better on its own, but what we do is we sort of capture all the responses coming through, and we are kind of going through all of those, and we'll sit down at some point and create a V2 training set. And that V2 training set will hopefully be an improvement. But you might have been noticing an improvement because previously we were not using a fine-tuned set. And so that's actually an easier way to get started if you want, as if you just went to chat.openai.com, but you're offering that through your app.
I think I'll just add to the fine-tuning process. I think the exciting for me is the more people who come through the Fivepreneur community and the more people who use that tool, the more ideas are being generated. But more important than that, me and Grant are looking at those ideas. We're seeing which ones are working. And then we can go back and update the data being fed into the Sarah tool to let it know kind of which ideas are excelling. And I think on top of that, something we can also do, and we've been looking into, is just using someone like Grant kind of insight on what he thinks are the kind of bullish areas, the bullish ideas, and again, feeding that all back into it. So it's kind of fine-tuning the AI and then the human element in between, pulling the strings and helping it navigate to a point where it's producing the most viable and kind of exciting and plausible ideas possible.
So Matt, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, people listening to this are kind of all ages, some have kids, some don't. Is learning how to code or going to school to learn how to code or become a developer going to be a viable career path in 5 years? Is it something that, AI is going to replace, or is that just more kind of doom and gloom speak? It would seem like to me, learning and knowing how to develop would be even more essential amidst an increasingly AI-driven future. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been teaching myself to code since I was like 10. I'm 27 now. Never went to college. And I just sort of posted like a YouTube video about this too. But I think everybody needs to learn how to code. And yes, AI is going to make that easier. And that's great. But it should be easier. It should be easier to just ask a computer what to do. Developers right now are translators between like what we want computers to do and what computers do. Like, did you know before computers were computers. The word computer was literally a job someone had that they sat down and they calculated things all day. Right. And like, we don't talk about like that job anymore. So I think it's just going to be such a massive shift that we don't know what it's going to look like in 10 years, but I know we're going to be using computers. And what programming really is just the art of really fundamentally understanding how that computer works and how to get it to do what you want. And AI is making that easier. But just because now everyone can sort of do what I'm able to do with a computer today, I've still got the underlying knowledge that I'm hoping, there's still fun to be had and innovation to be done in that sort of post AI world. But, once we get to AGI, no one knows, right? But I think at least in like, I'm having my first kid on the way right now, like I plan to teach him how to code. And I think it will be very important in his lifetime still too, right?
The last question for you is, you're clearly a guy who has a ton of different ideas. You said you had the Goated idea, a couple of years ago and really did this sort of 6-week sprint to get it live. Last question is, of all these ideas that you have, how did you pick one that you really wanted to build and test? And then the second part of that question is, if someone has an idea for building an app or building a SaaS product, what are a couple of steps that they can take to evaluate it and start?
Yeah. So with Goated, it wasn't like as rigid of a process of like picking the idea as it should have been. And that's where I really like what you and Logan have done with the Fivepreneur blueprints, is it feels like you've done a good job of like codifying what is a touchy-feely process of like having and validating an idea. So I sort of messed up, but I'm kind of like, as you might be painfully aware from working with me, Grant, just like a dive all the way in without thinking about it kind of guy. And so my thought process was build the leanest MVP possible, test it, throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And that would honestly be my advice to anyone, and do it even better, even leaner than me, is with software. It's like people think it's built and then it's done, but that's not it at all. It's like a plant, and like your first iteration is like you just put the seeds in there. And like you need to come back every week, every 2 weeks, look at your analytics, your funnels, your data, track your KPIs. Why is my retention dropping? Whatever, things like that, right? And sort of run with it. So it's hard to do like validation sort of ahead of time. For the getting started, I mean, it's like two camps. If you kind of know how to code, then I think you probably do know how to get started. But if you don't, I would urge you to find someone, a friend or family member that at least has some experience with this, and talk to them about it. Not in the way of like, hey, I have an idea, will you build it for me? Like, that's the quickest way to make one of your developer friends angry. But get their thoughts on just ballpark level of complexity, because a lot of things on the surface look either really easy or really hard with software. It's hard to know. So I think having just like a gut check is a great place to start. And then DraftBit is a tool I've used, which is like a drag and drop low code editor for people to make mobile apps. The next step would be to try to prototype it yourself, right? Try to just get something moving, working, get your feet wet with app development, figure out if it's for you or not. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it just is continually getting easier and easier. If you're not technical, just talking to someone that is about what you're in for is a good step, and then trying to make something yourself. Because I think people think that coding and making apps is really hard, and it is, but once you dive in, you realize that it's not just like ones and zeros like the movies make it look out to be, right?
Is there a good place to find help? I mean, I know I've previously hired developers, some successfully, some unsuccessfully, through Upwork and other platforms. Is there a place that like real developers know and go to get those types of jobs that you know about?
No, and that's one of my main like side hustles, is like I work with a couple different startups consulting, and I'm able to charge a really good rate because that's such a hard problem. I wish I had an answer for you, but technology is just so competitive, and that anyone charging like an affordable rate that you don't know, I hope it's not problematic for you, but it probably will be, right? And so I urge people to try to DIY before they hire. And if you do hire, get a buddy that works in software to just like help you out. Because if you are trusting them, and you have to, right? If you don't know the computer lingo, you have to trust them. It's so easy to get taken advantage of. And I've seen it happen just way too many times with both American and offshore agencies.
Yeah, it sounds like a really great business idea. I know one of the fastest growing kind of SaaS sort of online spaces right now are hyper vetted, kind of micro niche job websites and freelancer websites. So there's a number of these that have popped up that I know about that are making, multiple millions in annual revenue, that are basically just taking kind of the LinkedIn job board, the Indeed job board, and making it really hyper focused. So, if you want some SEO help, you can go to, one of my friends has this website, vetted.com, and it's just highly vetted SEO. experienced experts. And so you know that if you go through that website, you're getting someone really trusted. And these types of sites are popping up, in kind of marketing automation, in growth marketing and branding. I've seen them pop up, and some of them have been very, very successful. And I think that's a niche. So perhaps, Matt, if you do have extra time and any interest, a sort of vetted platform for developers of a certain kind, I think could be extremely successful.
Yeah, I'll check that out. And to be fair, I haven't given it a shot in 5-10 years, but it seems like if someone could crack it, it would be great. Yeah, I think another 5-10 hours a week of some help on Goated would be a big accelerator.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you sharing your perspective. So yeah, now I want to flip it kind of back to myself for content-driven businesses. In the last episode, I talked about how I'm evolving as a creator, and I'm thinking about myself as a creator, over the next, 10 plus years. I'm really leaning hard into kind of the analog space. And so I'm very bullish on books. Business books had, record sales last year. Book sales, are improving in kind of the personal development, sort of self-help and finance spaces. I'm very bullish on independent bookstores. I actually this morning toured a local bookstore here in Columbus, Ohio that I'm interested in acquiring. And so I'm very bullish on books and actual physical media at a time, when I think people are getting, increasingly overwhelmed, overburdened, kind of tired of their online experiences. I think we see this now with all the discussion of Google and their recent ranking algorithms, which if you're not familiar with, really since ChatGPT was released, Google has had an immense identity crisis, as well as a number of very public fumbles in their release of their own AI tools. And, I've been testing, Google SGE and Gemini on the back end as a beta tester really for about the past year. And my experience is pretty underwhelming in terms of Google's AI capability. So this is all basically causing what I think is kind of an internal identity crisis in the Google search ecosystem. A lot has been changing about how Google's ranking websites. The SEO community is really, up in arms. I mentioned how of the 5 sites that I own in my holding company, a few of them have been hit by recent Google algorithm updates, specifically my bankbonus.com website, which was, absolutely killing it from a recurring revenue standpoint, got hit in September, revenues dropped, about 70%, but has been, somewhat durable even with the traffic drop because the brand is strong and we've got a lot of fans of Bank Bonus and our email list is really good. So, being able to preserve that business, pretty much, but there's been just massive changes as Google tries to figure out what is relevancy. They've signed a deal with Reddit. Now that's why you're seeing Reddit, so often in the search results. So for someone who owns affiliate marketing driven content websites like me, I knew that the next, 5 years were going to be extremely tumultuous. That's certainly playing out. They're still very profitable websites to own just because they're so asset light. And so, I remain bullish on owning content websites. However, starting one from scratch, I do believe is getting more difficult, not to launch. It's certainly very easy to launch a website, but to make money on the website quickly. And it's certainly never been something that you could launch a website and make money tomorrow. But if you had focused effort really over a 6-month period, you could get your content to rank. You could start forming partnerships with other companies and promoting, their brands. And there's tons of different ways to make money from having a website. But if that's your only play, it's certainly getting more and more difficult. But I do remain very bullish on building a website as a platform that you own as a way to promote the number of ways that you make money. And ideally having, an e-commerce product or service or some other kind of singular affiliate based monetization method. So I recently bought a lead generation website in the mortgage space that's been quite profitable and doing really well. And that's because, there's a mortgage business on the back end. I've seen a number of different sites recently that have launched that have businesses behind them. So a search engine for accounting firms that has an accounting firm behind it and other types of service businesses where you're primarily generating leads for yourself. Same thing with, e-commerce SEO. I'm very bullish on it. If you can get your FBA product website to rank, but sell through your Shopify store directly, like what Logan talked about with his Secret Flask company. I'm very bullish on that. And really this intersection of what's known as content and commerce. And so I've been thinking a lot about as content businesses have increasingly shifted towards being, affiliate driven. And that's why you see, the Wall Street Journal, became a competitor of mine with their buy side website. You see CNN Underscored. You see all these big publishers now trying to leverage their brand and compete, essentially a la the New York Times Wirecutter model. A lot of the keywords that I used to rank for and monetize, now it's getting harder to do so because I'm competing with, the Forbes and the Time magazines and the CNNs and the APs and all these big platforms that are now writing content to rank in Google and then monetizing that. So I always knew that was coming. It was something that I saw early on, something that I knew that I wouldn't be able to build a content website business that would last, more than 10 years. I do think this is the last great age of doing kind of what I do. But on the flip side, I think there's ways to diversify and build websites that are very niche focused and that have products, whether that's e-commerce products or some type of service on the back end. So, it's no secret that every type of business has become a content company, and every sort of creator is launching, different monetization kind of platforms. And, it's really still the Wild West out there. I remain extremely bullish on making money online for the individual creator and for people who are interested in launching a side business. It's just gotten a little more competitive in the sense that coming in with a defined strategy, experimenting and iterating very rapidly, that's really, how you're going to find that one idea. And hopefully it's something that you really love to do. So I write about this very in depth in my new book, which comes out next year, where I talk about how to find a business idea, evaluate it, grow it, buy a business, scale your business, sell your business, build a holding company. And I write very actively about what I'm actually doing now and what I've done in the past. So I remain bullish on content websites, and you don't even have to be, social media influencer, and you can really kind of pick your own path. But the barrier to entry is still low, but because it's getting more competitive, that's one of the reasons that Logan and I decided to launch the Fivepreneur community, just because it is getting so competitive and it's so much easier to build businesses with the help of other people and test ideas with others who've been there before you. And that's been really, for me, the coolest thing about the community is just being able to use my experience and listen to an idea and immediately know, I don't think that's a great idea. I don't think that could be viable. Or, wow, that's a really unique idea. And most of the ideas that are coming out of the community are pretty unique. And then the next steps are coming up with an actionable execution plan and then actually, making it happen. Because, you can come up with the best side business idea in the world, but actually then executing on it and getting the product manufactured and starting to sell on Amazon, or getting your website up with 10 posts and an email funnel built, or launching, a SaaS company and actually coding, the platform or building the app, going from kind of idea to execution not only takes time, it might take some resources, and knowing what best decision to make next can be really, really challenging. And so in the community, we really focus on not only how do you find the idea, but how do you rapidly accelerate progress. And, I'm excited to announce that we're actually going to be opening up a free version of the community just to extend kind of, this advice and share this with more people. So keep a lookout for that at grantsabatier.com/community. We're going to open up a free community for everyone to join to learn about all of these things. And you don't even have to join the paid community. But once you find your idea, launching the paid community, if you want extra support to be able to ask me questions, to remain accountable, and to, have various defined action steps, you'll be able to do that really at any time. So I'm super excited to announce that. And it's going to be released very, very soon. So just check out grantsabatier.com/community for that free community. If you're interested in launching a side business, if you've gotten this far in the episode, you probably are, or you've listened and you've figured out that, wow, maybe I don't have the time to dedicate myself to, launching this business. Because the reality, it doesn't take a lot of money, but it does take time, and it does take, investing in finding an idea that you're passionate about and then starting to experiment rapidly. So that's really going to be my focus over the next 5 years, is helping others do what I was able to do, and then just staying very close to the market, because the space is changing so rapidly. And having made money now online for over 15 years, it's something, I have a lot of experience doing and I'm very passionate about doing. And I'm excited to help others on their journey. So we've covered quite a bit in this episode, from digging into Logan's Amazon FBA business to Matt's Goated app to talking a little bit about, my content holding company and businesses. Is there anything that I missed here, Logan, Matt, that you want to share? Any questions for me before we wrap up the show?
I've got one quick story about Logan's FBA. It was a really cool moment for me and then for him when I've seen twice now Once my friend posted on her Snapchat story that she was using Logan's products to sneak alcohol into a venue. She has no idea who Logan is, whatever. But I was like, I know the guy who invented that. And then twice I saw someone reselling one of Logan's products on OfferUp. I used to just think Amazon, evil corporation, whatever. But then I realized, like, I don't know what the stats are. I think 50% are FBA. And it's a person on the other end of the line there that's getting most of my money. And that was really cool to see, like, Logan's product, and like, it seems like a peek at like what the economy is going to look like in 50 years of just like everything online.
Any closing thoughts, Logan?
Yeah, I think from my side, I mean, I'm just, as you were speaking about, like reflecting on my fivepreneur and I guess wider entrepreneurial journey. And I consider myself hugely lucky that I've Grant part of my entrepreneurial journey from the get-go. And I think the unique lens kind of Grant brings, but also like the whole kind of financial freedom lens, which can be applied to entrepreneurship, is just all about, you know, what sort of life do you want to live and what are the trade-offs? And I think it's so easy to just be pulled into like the entrepreneurial sphere without having much consideration of how it could impact your life and weighing up the effort versus reward it's going to take. And I think the unique kind of journey I've had with getting my side business up and running, getting very, very front-loaded, passive Amazon FBA brands up and running, having that experience, but then also having the experience of working with someone like Matt and also Grant to build like a much wider software play, which is taking on the big mission to build one of the first purpose-built FI apps, which is Topia. And I guess just to really kind of drive home the differences in those two businesses, it's obviously the Amazon took a bit of time to get up and running, but started producing cash flow pretty immediately. Whereas Topia, although it's much more mission driven, and I'm generally hyper passionate about just helping people on their journey to unlocking more financial independence, a huge amount of work up front, which I drastically underestimated just how hard it is to build an application or any software product which resonates and gets a job done and adds value to people's life. A huge amount of work, and depending on the business, but a lot of them, it's a huge amount of work for that potential bigger payday much later down the line. So it's been a couple of years on Topia, like I said, you know, pulling no money out of it at the moment. What's getting me up every day is just that I'm hyper passionate about the mission we're on. And I do also believe in the future value coming through. But I do see a lot of people reaching out to me saying, you know, I don't know whether they've just read an article on Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, but pitching me some kind of crazy big vision and asking for advice just because I've been down that road. And I always start with, you know, you just need to be aware of the trade-offs you're going to make from going on that side of the business spectrum compared to something which is more lifestyle focused.
I really love that. I'm glad you brought it back to, you know, what's the purpose of doing all this in the first place, right? Making enough money to build a life you love and live a life that you love. And I think you're spot on with that. There's a lot of different paths to freedom. And one of the things that I've focused really the last 10 years of my career on is, you know, helping people recognize that there are other paths than the traditional W-2, 9-to-5, save a little bit of your money, maybe never be able to retire, and that there are ways to accelerate your journey to financial independence rapidly. And for me, entrepreneurship has been really that driving force more than anything else. And if I wasn't able to not only just leverage, you know, more of my time to make more money, but do that in a way that adds value to people's lives and ultimately creates something new, then I certainly wouldn't be sitting here today where I am. So I remain immensely curious about where this space is going and more bullish than ever on using a side business to not only make more money, but ultimately expand your life. So I really appreciate, you know, you, Logan, and you, Matt, taking the time to share your stories today and be so open and be so tactical, as well as it's just a pure joy, you know, having the opportunity to work with you on the Fivepreneur community and Topia and continue to chart this path forward and helping others find something that they love and ultimately get more freedom in their life. So thanks for coming on the show. Hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.